Today, we journey back to the early 20th century to explore the visionary leadership of Alfred P. Sloan, the man who revolutionized General Motors and in the process reshaped the entire automobile industry. Picture this. It's the 1920s, and the automobile industry is in its infancy. Ford's Model T dominates the roads, and Henry Ford's one-size-fits-all philosophy has made cars affordable for the masses. Yet, amidst this burgeoning market, General Motors is struggling, a conglomerate of loosely connected brands without a coherent strategy or vision. Enter Alfred Sloan, an engineer by training, a strategist by nature. Sloan steps into the role of GM's president with a radical new idea. Instead of competing directly with Ford's monolithic approach, he envisions a company whose variety and consumer choice are paramount. He dreams of a car for every purse and purpose, catering to different tastes, needs, and budgets. But Sloan's genius doesn't stop at market segmentation. He introduces the concept of annual model changes, enticing consumers to desire the latest and greatest each year. He also implements a decentralized management structure, empowering individual divisions to innovate while maintaining a unified corporate strategy through a central office. The results are nothing short of transformative. Under his leadership, GM not only survives but thrives, surpassing Ford to become the world's largest automobile manufacturer. His principles of managerial decentralization, strategic marketing, and consumer focus become foundational in modern business practices. Sloan's story is not just one of corporate success. It's a tale of visionary leadership, of seeing the potential in a chaotic market, and of having the courage to implement revolutionary ideas. So stay tuned as we dive deeper into the life and legacy of Alfred Sloan, exploring how his innovative thinking and strategic brilliance continue to influence the business world today. So now, let's journey into the remarkable mind of Alfred Sloan, the man who turned General Motors into a global titan. So that is the subject of episode 33 today, Alfred Sloan, who was heavily involved within General Motors and its success and its competition with Ford directly there, as was described. And so with that, welcome back to Leaders, a podcast dedicated to exploring the best leaders this world has ever seen. Automobile industry, we have covered Henry Ford here back on episode 6 as another auto leader of this era. We also did cover Lee Iacocca back in episode 4. That also touched upon a great turnaround that he had within Chrysler. And now we will go more into Sloan and his legacy and leadership style for General Motors. And so really where this begins is when Alfred Sloan is joining General Motors in 1916. And so he joined them when GM acquired the Hyatt Roller Bearing Company, where Sloan was president. So Sloan first started in a refrigeration system for hotels and apartment buildings company prior to first returning to Hyatt Bearings, of which he started at, stopped, and then returned back, and this time as president. And it says Sloan and Pete Steenstrup took over the business. Alfred did the engineering and Pete handled sales. Both realized that the emerging auto industry, then in its infancy, held great opportunities for Hyatt. Pete was soon visiting every major automaker. Pete tried to get Alfred to spend more time making sales calls with him because Pete could not talk the language of their engineer customers. At first, Sloan resisted, but eventually started visiting Detroit and meeting industry leaders, which included both Henry Ford and Billy Durant. Billy Durant being the colorful founder of GM. We will also cover Billy in the mentors section and kind of compare and contrast Durant with Sloan, as they were two totally different leaders. And so Hyatt Bearings is eventually sold to United Motors, where Sloan becomes president. He served GM, its stockholders, employees, suppliers, and customers as president from 1923 to 1943. This was a pivotal moment as he began to implement his vision for the company. Appointment came when GM was struggling to compete with the Model T, as we outlined in that introduction story. He was chairman of the board from 37 to 56 and as an honorary chairman until his death at the age of 90 in 1966. During this extended period at GM, he eventually passed up Ford Motor, became the largest company in the world, and served as a model for other big corporations. He also did introduce that concept, and this is kind of just to define out some other key business defining career moments prior to us diving into the leadership aspects of his role. And so the introduction of the car for every purse and purpose strategy, so that was one of his most significant contributions for a market segmentation strategy, introduced the idea of offering a range of vehicles that catered to different income levels and preferences. That strategy allowed them to then appeal to broader audiences and differentiate from Ford's one model approach. The decentralization management structure, too, was established by Sloan, and that was revolutionary at the time, dividing the company into semi-autonomous divisions, each responsible for their own operations. That allowed greater flexibility and innovation within each division while maintaining overall corporate coherence through a central office. Annual model changes, so he introduced the concept of that, encouraging customers to buy new cars more frequently. It not only boosted their sales, but he also established a culture of continuous improvement and innovation. He did create also the General Motors Acceptance Corporation. So in 1919, he played a key role in doing that, the finance arm of GM. So that basically provided finance options to customers, making it easier for them to purchase cars. That then expanded their customer base and contributed to the company's growth. He then wrote, and this is what a lot of the content within this episode comes from, but My Years with General Motors, he wrote that after retiring, and he published that in 1964. And that book really became a seminal work in business literature, offering insights into his management philosophy and strategies that led to GM's success. Remained influential in the field of management and business studies. Philanthropic endeavors followed that, so he was known for that. He established the Alfred Sloan Foundation in 1934, which has since funded numerous projects in science, technology, and education. His contributions extended beyond the business world, impacting various fields throughout his charitable work. And so now let's go into more of his mantras, his leadership style. So as a person generally described as persistent and determined, describes confidence as one man's success and another's failure. And then he self-described his own sort of philosophy into 5 different statements. Get the facts, number 1. 2, recognize the equities of all concerned. 3, realize the necessity of doing better every day. 4, have an open mind and work hard. And 5, there is no shortcut. So more into the philosophies, and some of these quotes kind of go more into his values and what other key principles Sloan had. And so whereas Taylor, which is referencing Frederick Winslow Taylor, occasionally backs off to justify his ardor for efficiency in human terms, not once does Sloan make reference to any other values. Freedom, equality, humanism, stability, community, tradition, religion, patriotism, family, love, virtue, nature, all are ignored. In the one personal element in his book, he makes passing reference to his wife. He abandons her on the first day of a European vacation to return to business in Detroit. His language is as calculating as that of the engineer of old working with calipers and slide rule, as cold as the steel he caused to be bent to form cars, economizing, utility, facts, objectivity, systems, rationality, maximizing. That is the stuff of his vocabulary. So definitely a company man, and I think throughout his career, lots of what he knew was GM and working for GM. He predicted that remaining at the top of its industry and the economy would prove a bigger challenge for GM than was getting there, and it turned out that he was right. He also seemed confident, though, that the management style of GM under his leadership, if continued and adapted, could meet these challenges. He said, "There have been and always will be many opportunities to fail in the automobile industry. The circumstances of the ever-changing market and ever-changing product are capable of breaking any business organization if that organization is unprepared for change. Indeed, in my opinion, if it has not provided procedures for anticipating change. In General Motors, these procedures are provided by the central management, which is in a position to appraise the broad long-term trends of the market. As the industry has grown and evolved, we have adhered to this policy and have demonstrated an ability to meet competition and the shifts of customer demand." Not only did GM listen to what customers wanted, they also developed that for every purpose idea for a car. The sort of combination of the new organizational structure, financial controls, great marketing, and product line expansion led GM to become the largest industrial enterprise on earth under Sloan, and under his leadership, the company, impressively, never lost money in the Great Depression. At work, Sloan was obsessed with objectivity, fairness, and honesty. He readily promoted people he did not personally like and fired people he liked. He worked hard to keep personality out of decisions. He didn't socialize with fellow board members and executives. He did feel that the most important task of management was to put the right people in the right positions, adjusting for their strengths and weaknesses, that the only way to judge people was by their results. Alfred readily spent hours on picking the right man, quote unquote, even for lower level management positions. So a common theme that I think you find in a lot of these great business leaders is that heavy concentration, focus on the talent aspect and putting the right people into the right positions, as Sloan said. So definitely a repeatable quality that we've seen amongst these leaders. And so going more into some of these other key leadership styles and principles, number one being decentralization with coordinated control. So he implemented that structure, and there is a chart that's kind of hard to describe within the visuals here, but it's kind of the first construction of a very segmented out and detailed organization chart. And so that chart really is the most important and most studied organization chart in business history. GM developed a long history of talking and writing about its policies and procedures for all to see, somewhat unusual in the business world. Alfred Sloan achieved world fame as the man behind this decentralization concept. That idea was that the manager of each operating division of the company, such as Chevy or Cadillac, had total operating freedom and control over their profit center. Place good leaders at the head of each division and it would prosper. Don't meddle in their business in the way that the founder of GM, Billy Durant, had. He was more pegged as a micromanager versus Alfred Sloan, I would say, is a little more hands-off on his approach. At the same time, headquarters, including Sloan, needed to know how each division was doing in order to know if the company had the right people running the divisions. That decentralized system was accompanied by a system of very centralized financial controls to monitor every aspect of the business. That system focused on separating key policy decisions, such as where to invest more capital, how to differentiate the 5 car brands, how to finance the company, from operating decisions. In other words, committees determined what to do, and while the operators carried out the plans, the how to do it. So we've heard some contrasting, I think, views on committees. I think Jack Welch famously said that, the committees aren't making the decisions, the people, like individual people, are. So Sloan has a differing approach on that. He runs everything, it seems, bigger decisions through committees. So he had that idea. And so Sloan restructured that, each with its own GM responsible for performance. This allowed each division to be agile and responsive to market conditions, while strategic decisions such as budgeting and resource allocation were more so coordinated centrally to ensure alignment with GM's overall goals. He did also have a strategic vision and long-term planning as part of his leadership style, so emphasizing that over short-term gains, positioning them for sustained success and growth. He introduced that concept of annual model changes, a product ladder, which encouraged customers to stay within the GM family by progressing from lower-priced models to more luxurious ones as their incomes increased. That strategy not only kept customers loyal, but also ensured a steady stream of revenue from repeat buyers, meaning someone could start at a lower level, like the Chevy level that they had described, and then as their financial situation may improve, maybe upgrade to, at some point, maybe the higher levels of like a car like Cadillac. So the idea is just to continue to stay within the family of GM, but kind of interact with the brands as you go. 3 is focus on market research and consumer preferences. So he believed in that understanding consumer needs and preferences, leveraging market research to guide product development and marketing strategies. He established their marketing research department, one of the first in the industry to gather that consumer data, and it allowed them to tailor their products more precisely to different segments. Professional management and efficiency 4. He advocated for that. He prioritized data-driven decision-making and systematic processes over intuition and tradition. Again, this is where he is going to differ from some of these other leaders, where Steve Jobs, Bezos may rely more on the intuition side of things. Sloan was very structured and wanted to make the decisions through pure data and process. And so he implemented financial controls, modern management techniques such as ROI as a key performance metric. That analytical approach ensured that their operations were optimized for efficiency. Innovation and adaptability. So he encouraged that not only in the products, but in the processes and org structure, ensuring that they could adapt to market conditions, tech advancements. Number 6, empowerment and development of leadership. So he focused on the talent within the organization we mentioned before, ensuring a pipeline of capable leaders could drive the company's future success. He developed his own management development program that identified promising employees and provided them the training and opportunities needed to advance into leadership positions. 7, customer orientation. He placed a high value on that satisfaction, loyalty, understanding that their success was actually directly tied to its ability to meet and then exceed customer expectations. 8, finally here, is emphasis on corporate responsibility. So he believed in that and the ethics, recognizing the broader impact of the company's operations on society. He was instrumental in the establishment of the Sloan Foundation, which funded education, science, public health initiatives. He reflected also on the belief that corporations should contribute positively to society beyond their business operations. Episode 21, we covered the current CEO of GM, Mary Barra, and she definitely has carried through, I think, this emphasis on corporate responsibility and some of these other different structural and management kind of styles and philosophies throughout the years from Sloan all the way up to today. Some of his principles and ideas you can still see within the company today. Let's move on now to more failures and challenges that Sloan encountered through his GM years. And so for the hundreds or thousands of management scholars and academics who have studied him, a big question is, if GM, quote unquote, sort of perfected management systems, why did the company go into decline at the end of the 20th century? Page after page has been written implying that his system had flaws that eventually became apparent. So we've talked about this before as well as part of a evaluation of a leader. Is the lasting legacy not only of your successor, however, is also based on the sort of financial performance of the company, and does it return shareholder value? And so that's where Sloan's management systems has not done as well, and you can carry that through, I think, to today of episode 21. Again, Mary Barra, the GM sort of financial return over time has not been as strong maybe as some of the other autos. Some of the other major failures / challenges that he encountered included initial resistance to unionization. So that led to really significant unrest and strikes, which disrupted their reputation. An example being the Flint sit-down strike of 1936 and 1937 was a critical moment where workers occupied plants to demand union recognition. His resistance to those demands initially exacerbated that conflict, leading to a prolonged and public battle before they eventually recognized the UAW. He maybe overemphasized too decentralization. It at times may have led to also then inefficiencies and a lack of cohesion within the company by overemphasizing it. That high degree of autonomy given to divisions sometimes resulted in duplication of efforts and competition between divisions rather than collaboration. That issue required adjustments to ensure the benefits were not undermined by conflicts. He also perhaps had slow adaptation to market changes. There were periods when GM was slow to respond to dynamics and consumer preferences, especially during the 70s. So in the 70s, they were slow for that rising demand for smaller, fuel-efficient cars in response to the oil crisis. This allowed foreign competitors, particularly Japanese automakers, to gain a significant foothold in the U.S. market. GM's delayed response resulted in lost market share and required strategic shifts to regain competitiveness. Finally, environmental and safety issues. They were criticized for their approach to some of the environmental and safety concerns. They at first had resisted implementing safety features and emission controls, prioritizing cost and production efficiency over those standards. That approach led to criticism, regulatory pressure, impacting their public image, and later investments in compliance and innovation in those areas. Final section we'll cover off on are the mentors and heroes. The first one for mentors is Henry Leland. He was of Cadillac, and what Sloan admired about him / was mentored on was his accuracy in the products. Being also a fellow engineer, he was able to kind of relate to him a little bit more, and I think it forced Sloan also to increase his standards. Walter Chrysler also admired him for the automobile production philosophies that he had implemented there. Charles Kettering was an inventor and head of research at GM, known for his innovative contributions to the auto industry. So Sloan learned the importance of innovation and research from him. Developing electric self-starter for automobiles is an example of how tech advancements created significant competitive advantages. Sloan recognized the value also of fostering a collaborative environment between engineering and management to drive innovation. Pierre DuPont is a key figure in the DuPont company who became major investors into GM, playing a crucial role in his career development at GM. Financial acumen, DuPont really had emphasis on financial control accountability influencing his approach to managing their finances, including the implementation of rigorous financial reporting and those ROI metrics. DuPont also supported his vision of that decentralized organizational structure, which became a cornerstone of their management strategy. 3 is Henry Bourne Joy. He was a president of Packard Motor Car Company and early mentor when he was with the Hyatt Roller Bearing Company. Henry Joy, industry insight he had. So Joy provided Sloan with valuable insights into the auto industry, emphasizing importance of understanding market dynamics and customer preferences, and then strategic thinking and long-term planning from him as well. Billy Durant was the founder of GM and played a significant role in Sloan's early career at GM. Billy Durant, Sloan was a little bit different from him, but Sloan also, I think, learned a lot from him. Sloan valued precision and described himself as a manufacturer. He, quote unquote, sort of coined the term professional manager. And his management style was more impulsive compared to Sloan's systematic approach. Sloan had to learn then the importance of having a bold vision and ambition for the future. Durant's acquisition strategy was also very aggressive, and that taught Sloan about the potential benefits and pitfalls of expansion through that M&A strategy. Sloan later applied a more measured approach to growth, focusing on integrating and optimizing acquired entities. Frederick Winslow Taylor was a personal mentor, and he had the principles of scientific management, which greatly influenced Sloan's approach to management. Efficiency and productivity were some of the emphasis that Taylor had that Sloan ended up approaching and adopting into GM, and the use of data to drive decision-making. In addition, professional management, Taylor's advocacy for professional management practices resonated with Sloan, and he championed the idea of running a corporation with a professional and analytical mindset. And finally here, Herbert Hoover before becoming the U.S. president, he was an engineer and businessman who interacted with Sloan in various capacities. Sloan learned engineering and management integration from Hoover's ability to bridge engineering expertise with effective management practices, reinforcing Sloan's belief in that integration, as well as the public service and responsibility. Hoover had an emphasis on that, which influenced Sloan's views on that broader kind of social responsibility of a corporation. Today, Sloan, probably most from a legacy standpoint, too, visible from his philanthropy. In addition to Sloan Kettering, he funded the management school at MIT, so MIT Sloan. He was always a believer in education for people at all levels in GM, funding the GM Institute and many other programs. The Sloan Foundation, created in the 1930s, today funds everything from scientific research to PBS programs with over $100 million a year in grants from its almost $2 billion in investments. So impressive stuff there from Sloan and his philanthropy. We've seen that too within the last two leaders that we've studied amongst others, but Rockefeller and Vanderbilt definitely have their lasting legacy through philanthropy and their foundations and what they've donated to as well. And so with that, Alfred Sloan, another auto leader, very relevant to study in this day and age as far as a leader goes. Lots of different key successes that he helped to differentiate GM, and eventually Ford definitely had the first leg up in terms of really adopting a mass production of autos in the U.S. However, Sloan's management practices definitely helped with accelerating GM and making it, at one point, the largest automaker in the world. So Alfred Sloan here on episode 33, definitely worthy of study and of more detail and research outside of this episode. So encourage you to subscribe if you haven't. Rate, review this episode and this podcast. That would be heavily appreciated, and it would help spread the word on the Leaders Podcast here. So with that, episode 33, Alfred Sloan, and we will be back here soon with episode 34. Thanks for listening.